A question often asked is, do you need qualifications to be a writer? Here are my thoughts. You may have your own, and if you do, feel free to comment. My short answer is no, but it wouldn't hurt. Showing how you're involved in the writing world in other ways can be just as good along with that all-important manuscript. Now, here's my long answer. Writing, like most arts, are fortunate to be accessible by people outside of traditional educational paths. Some people would say they have a low, perhaps even non-existent bar of entry. We see stories of young debuting prodigies all the time, some who have degrees, some too young to even go to university. They get a lot of buzz, but an even larger portion of writers begin their journeys older than that, returning to the craft as a freedom from work, a hobby, to leave a legacy or socialise in writing groups, perhaps even write a story for their grandchild. I'm somewhere in the middle. I took the required English exams in schools and then dropped the subject, but I was an avid reader and wrote small pieces for fun. My grades were adequate, but not the highest in my class. I thought that if I wasn't the one with the best English results, those being the ones who had their work read out to the class as a see how it's done exercise, then I could never be a real writer, and certainly not an author. It took a long time for me to realise that analysing prose in school was paving the way for a literary academic path, one that would lead to either a history of language, book awards, linguistics, but not necessarily the best sellers. And there was the disconnect that no one ever explained. I'd guiltily read vampire romance novels and large fantasy books that would never be discussed in my English class. I'd gasp when in one of the books it began a sentence with the word and or because. I pointed it out to my English teacher, who shook her head and wondered how it had ever been purchased for the school library in the first place. Of course, now I know you need to learn the rules of writing, so you can learn to break them. And the only storycraft I'd ever been taught was when I was 6, being told that stories needed a beginning, middle and end. And there's the difference. I see writing as a craft, and crafts typically aren't taught in schools. Even art, music and drama are taught to be picked apart academically, but learning the craft well enough to flourish on your own is something you did with your own money in your own time. People are told to talk about their passions in their applications to university, and I wasn't going to lie, I wasn't passionate about any of the courses at the time, even academically slanted English. After all, I was the person who read Pride and Prejudice only after reading Pride, Prejudice and Zombies. Call it gateway reading. By that point, English was a backup option for me if I didn't get the apprenticeship I was after. I wasn't going to commit to university and spend so much money on a degree that I wouldn't be fully engaged in. I began working when I was 17, but that didn't stop me falling in love with my local library, their science fiction, fantasy, teen, and newly created manga section, which I adored. Whereas at school I'd been told a book in your reading age is one with 3 words on the first page that you'd need a dictionary for, the librarians were happy to see books of all ranges and genres being checked out. I vividly remember the time I took out my first David Eddings fantasy book, Belgarath the Sorcerer, from my school library, and the librarian was happy to see it being read after so long. Librarians truly are the champions of reading. As time passed, school became a memory, and the guilt lessened for reading popular genre fiction. The recession hit, and my job was scrapped as an efficiency saving. After that, I spent a few years exploring the arts, including poetry, drama, short films and music. I began to enjoy writing again, original works outside of short fan fictions, and people enjoyed what I created. Age 24, I figured out a degree of some sort might help, and wanted to give science, a long-held passion of mine, another go. Traditionally, after leaving high school in the UK, you would study A-levels for 2 years before moving on to university. I'd originally studied for 1 year, then hit the eject button. However, instead of sitting with a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds, There's a poorly advertised equivalent qualification aimed at mature students who have life experience that schools will barely ever admit exists. After all, that would reflect badly on their university acceptance figures, you know. It's called the Access to Higher Education Diploma. It's an intense one-year course with university skills like referencing built into coursework alongside tests. This style of course suited me far better than A-levels ever did. In GCSEs, I was getting A's, whereas in A-levels, I was getting D's. But in the Access to Higher Education Diploma, those D's now stood for distinctions. The class was small and dedicated, with everyone taking time out of their busy lives to focus on the same goal. Not being able to abandon the arts completely, I pivoted and applied to study philosophy, where I could ask questions about art and science. I applied to 2 universities, both Russell Group, and was accepted by each. The Russell Group are known as premier universities in the UK for world-class research. Some people say if you can't get into a Russell Group university, it's not worth going to university and to apply again. I think all universities have something different to offer, and it depends what you're looking for. For example, Russell Group universities may not have their world-class research for the subject that you want to study. It was a 3-year degree, and I lasted a year and 2 months before I was too ill to continue, and was forced to drop out. I'd been getting firsts, and told that I'd explained things really well. My highest scoring essay was about the difference between writing something nonsensical and writing absolute gibberish. When I returned to writing as a craft, I dipped my toe in with poetry because that's what I was experienced with. But as time went on, the escapism of novels became invaluable, and I dived into learning how to write a book for an entire year. I watched AuthorTube, Brandon Sanderson's infamous college creative writing lectures, listened to podcasts, followed people's writing journeys, then built up my writing craft book collection. I created my own beat sheets, worked through character building exercises, and over the course of 6 months plotted my first novel. Reading a writing craft book is one thing, but you learn what they're trying to say by doing. Top tip: do the exercises. They help. Now I'm revising and editing my novel, and I'm still learning as I find my own methods. They say writing advice has changed over the years, but I think it's the perspective of that advice that has changed. It used to be said write every day, or said is dead, and people now call this bad advice. People who grew up listening to this advice now say ignore it. I think they learned that advice, but as they progressed, then learned how to break it. Ultimately, said can be repetitive, and establishing a writing routine is a good place to start your journey. So, you've got a degree, or you've read writing craft books, or questioned some advice. Are you qualified yet? I have a track record of writing novels for 2 years now, and other mediums for much longer. So, I'd say I'm experienced, because I'm doing the thing. And I keep coming back to doing the thing. Every week, I set aside some time to refresh my writing craft knowledge, watching videos, doing exercises, reading books, or looking through tips on websites like Write Mentor, an organisation based in the UK. I may not have a traditional writing degree, but with time and practice, like with any craft, I'm getting better. I write genre fiction for pure entertainment purposes. With the internet and time, school grades matter less and less in this field, and I'm thankful that I can learn and indulge in the craft even as disabled as I am. I completely understand those who want to write more important, academically groundbreaking literary novels. If so, I'd encourage you to try for a writing degree, but I have a feeling you'll be there already without my prompting. With great appreciation for the lower requirements of entry, I continue to write my story. One day at a time.